without the nasty raw feels. Now, someone might say, in the case of our silicon robots, that when you tip sulfuric acid over their extremities, then they do actually feel phenomenal agony. Well, this would take us into territory of the philosophy of mind, but at least temporarily I'm going to say dogmatically that there is no necessary connection between the actual nasty raw feels of agony and no deception that they can be decoupled. However, as I said, I wasn't actually, at least in the medium term, I think we can be investigating the possibility of making sure that offspring don't suffer unduly, that one can still retain the informational sensitivity to noxious stimuli, but without the shocking nastiness of physical pain as it exists today. So yes, this is a question. When it does become technically feasible to choose the genetic makeup of future children, what allele would you choose for your future offspring? Designer babies is clearly a rather pejorative label. It sounds rather frivolous, like designer clothes or something like that, but it is coming, and probably a lot of people, at least initially, would do as now, want to just trust the throw of the genetic dice, but equally I think many parents, responsible parents, will essentially want to choose the genetic makeup, the psychological and physical health of their future offspring. And I would predict there is going to be selection pressure against the nastier variants of the SCN9A gene.
Can I just add, are you suggesting here a selection amongst naturally occurring alleles at this moment in time?
Yes, clearly it will be also possible to design.
Well, this is the question, because what would be the sort of so you say you came up with a new variation, so you weren't selecting from the natural one, so there wasn't the natural experiment already done as to their safety. So you say you're the parent, and now you've got a choice. This natural allele, which might reduce your child's sensitivity to pain somewhat, and then we've got this new super duper allele which we've synthesized. So as a parent, then what are you going to choose? Because this new super duper allele is kind of like an unknown quantity, isn't it?
It's a dilemma. The safe thing to do if one is a parent is to choose an existing allele of low pain sensitivity. But yes, what if as we actually understand better the molecular mechanisms behind the actual experience of pain, how does one actually test?
And would you be in favour of animal modelling?
Well, this is it. Not all of my colleagues in the animal activist community would agree with me here, but if an intervention or an experiment is designed actually to minimise and reduce suffering, assuming a suitable ethics committee has reviewed it, then I would support it. But what I would say is that I don't think a morally relevant consideration is that an unhuman animal, the actual species of the organism, because the best models, in a sense, are human models.
So, David, are you saying that if you don't have the nastier version of this gene, you're still sensitive to pain situations, you still want to get out of these situations because you don't have that phenomenological feel?
Yes. And I don't know if you've ever known people who do seem to have very, very high pain threshold. They just don't. And unfortunately, under severe interrogation, I would spill the secrets within about 10 seconds. But there are some people who just do not seem to experience this, and it's something we are going to be able to control within the next few decades. And as I said, if one isn't in a state of pain right now, it's just pain, suffering. But yeah, sorry.
Yeah, isn't pain a rather more complex phenomenon? Certainly in human beings, there's a very big psychological component. For example, there's a kind of experiment where you have a melting ice in water, you put your hand in. After a while, it becomes very painful. But you can hold it there because you know it's not doing any damage. If you tell somebody is doing damage and force them to hold their hand there, they'll subjectively experience a lot more pain. It becomes less tolerable.
Yes, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, inevitably, I am going to be somewhat simplifying the issues here. But I suppose the point I wanted to make is that it's not, one might imagine that, let's say, there are dozens or even hundreds of genes and you'll get a kind of combinatorial explosion, and it's impossibly difficult to assess the effects. But it actually seems to be relatively straightforward.
One more question on this. You talk about choosing the genomes for our offspring. Can we talk about reprogramming our own genomes so that although I'm 50 odd years old, there might be a time in the future when I can change which allele of the SCAN9A gene is present in my body?
Yes, very much so. Indeed, in some ways, well, it is generally held that so-called autosomal gene therapies or interventions pose less ethical challenges than germline gene therapy. I'm not sure if this is really the case, given that even germline gene interventions can be reversed. But yes, if you suffer from a naturally a low pain threshold, or you have any form of pain disorder, it would be possible to have gene therapy and not endless drug interventions. There is much, further into the future, as I was suggesting, though, I'm going to speculate that it would be possible to have the same informational sensitivity to noxious stimuli, and yet at the same time perpetually have immense bodily well-being. Now this is counterintuitive. Surely if one was still feeling good, that is an adequate motivation to withdraw from noxious stimuli. But surprisingly, the people who seem to be happiest also seem to be the most motivated, and what seems to be relevant from an information theoretic point of view is not one's absolute point in scale, either in terms of physical pain or, for that matter, the hedonic scale of emotions, but simply that there is a difference. But once again, this is speculative. If it transpires that gradients of well-being are inadequate to do this, one could have, as I was suggesting, smart prostheses. Most of us, however, would probably want a manual override. Otherwise, one would feel one had lost control of one's body. Now, probably we won't, at least unless anyone else wants to do so, go into the nature of the hard problem of consciousness, explanatory gap, why it is that we actually feel phenomenal pain at all, which is a deep mystery, if you think about it, given that the laws of physics appear to be closed and causally sufficient to generate our behaviour without the nasty raw feels at all. Why is it that we experience pain? But this would take us quite a long, quite far afield, however. Oh, sorry, yes, sir.
Just very briefly, would you mind explaining, in the context of this discussion, for you what the difference is between pain and suffering, or if there is one?
A pinprick is aversive, but one wouldn't describe it as suffering. The actual distinction between when does pain actually become suffering is probably conventional, which doesn't mean to say it's arbitrary. And given the limitations of our language, it's not as though we have a precise cut-off point or mark that says pain is now becoming suffering. Yes, as I would say, the distinction I would say is unclear. But nonetheless, there are modes of aversive experience that are undeniably suffering, and there are others, like a pinprick, which, though informative, nonetheless don't amount to suffering. If that,
So when you talk about trying to avoid pain in this case, are you really saying trying to avoid suffering? And are we meant to take that some pain is okay in certain situations?
in the short to medium term, it strikes me as the priority is to get rid of all forms of suffering in the full sense, not the pain of pinpricks. Looking towards the longer term, I'm actually would predict, it's not in the Transhumanist Declaration I think, but I would actually predict that our entire lives are going to be biologically underpinned by gradients of bliss, orders of magnitude richer than today's peak experiences. But that is looking much further into the future. For now, I think the priority is getting rid of suffering in the full-blooded sense, and one can actually see technically how it can be done. Transhumanists have many wild and wonderful ideas about what technology will deliver us, but perhaps it's worth my saying that nothing that I'm going to be saying in this talk depends on exotic technologies or anything like the singularity or anything like that. It's all going to revolve around either existing technologies or recognizable extensions of existing technologies. Okay. Oh, sorry. Any?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'd just like to ask the question about, say, shamanic experience, rites of passage, these kinds of things whereby, in fact, pain could be a relevant part of these experiences. For example, scarification rituals in African tribes, whereby, you know, pain is actually, you know, overcoming the pain by force of will is actually part of that initiation ceremony, for example. And some shamanic experiences whereby, you know, the perception of all parts of the mind being released and spaced out, for example, and then coming back, and profound, you know, experience there is part of the actual experience, and whereby for people to have gone through that actually makes them, you know, more sort of full-on whole person at the end of that experience, because they have actually suffered, or, you know, they've actually experienced high levels of pain and been able to overcome that and get through it. And actually with the scarification, for example, they had this as part of their, you know, life's experience afterwards, to show that they have actually experienced that. And so that, as part of certain societies and so on, it may be more like pagan and so on and so forth, would be, you know, relevant, and also seen as a good thing, a positive thing, rather than, you know, in our sort of general society, you know, trying to avoid any experience like that all the time, whereby, you know, it's actually maybe doesn't make a person, you know, have that experience, thereby, you know, maybe they, in certain sort of people's ideas, maybe are missing out on something.
Yes, that's a very very good point. I mean, in the continuum of suffering, there is a world of difference between pain, extreme pain that seems meaningless, unrelieved, meaningless despair, depression, physical pain, and suffering that seems meaningful. And if one's looking at the physiological basis of this, it seems that certain forms of pain coexist with the release of endogenous opioids. Something like, for instance, sort of masochists, for instance. People will sometimes ask, well, should masochists be robbed of their pleasures if you're going to get rid of all physical pain? But a masochist doesn't enjoy getting his or her fingers caught in the door any more than you or me. It's only certain forms of pain in a particular context. And yes, today there are